But in order to tie the company together, we got away from revenue scoring and we got into gross profit measurement. So if we get $1 million order from Kohl's, that might actually be $250,000 worth of gross profit dollars. If we get a $550,000 order from Dillard's, that's $325,000 of gross profit. In the old days, the $1 million order takers were pounding their chest again. Here we go, the big order. But it was the Dillard's order that really made some impact.
Welcome to the Great Talent, Great Business Podcast, your go-to resource for building exceptional teams and thriving businesses. Each episode delivers actionable insights on harnessing offshore talent, integrating innovative technology, cultivating a vibrant company culture, and attracting and retaining top performers. Subscribe now to never miss an episode. For more resources, visit greattalentpodcast.com, where you can download this episode's free worksheet designed to help you apply today's insight to your business. And now, here's your host, Rob Levin.
Today, I'm here with Drew Pizzo, owner and president of Collection 18, a women's fashion accessories company that he's been leading since 1992. With more than 3 decades in the fashion industry, Collection 18, under Drew's leadership, has built a reputation for driving innovation and growth in the accessory space. Beyond his work at Collection 18, he also serves as president of the executive board at Cancer Care and vice chairman of the Fashion Accessories Benefit Ball. Drew, welcome to the show, and let's dive right in.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Good to see you as always.
So, Drew, fashion moves fast and culture moves fast. I don't have to tell you that. In fact, I think you've told me that over the years. How have you shaped a company culture that really supports adapting to that fast change? And plus, you guys are designing stuff a season or 2 or 3 ahead of time. Tell us a little bit about how you have built a culture that supports that kind of creativity.
I'd love to. I think the first thing I'd like to say is that before building a culture or even thinking about what the culture should be or needs to be, I was very fortunate that I was directed towards a couple of different coaching organizations early in my career. There's somebody named Jeff Smart who wrote, the book was called Who, and basically he was the father of top grading. And very early in my CEO career, happened to pick up on a program that Jeff was offering, and one of his consultants worked for a few years. That helped. And then, as you well know, Dan Sullivan of the Strategic Coach, I've been a participant and a client of Strategic Coach for many years. And then Vistage, I think you and I were also in a Vistage group together. You share my love of learning and my desire for improvement. And so I learned early on a couple of things specifically from Dan Sullivan about unique ability. And when I was able to focus in on unique ability and what I do exceptionally well and how I create value, I was able to extrapolate that and then build a team based on unique ability. One of the things that I remember hearing, even before that, I had a partner for the first 10 years. I had started my own business in the street fairs in Manhattan in fashion and merged it into this company. And we operated for 10 years together. She was 30 years my senior. And she agreed and allowed me to buy her out. And when I bought her out in the early 2000s, it was actually 2002, it took me a couple of years to figure out how am I going to scale and transform this business. And I had hired a young woman. It was really my first significant hire. In the early 2000s, if people were coming out of good schools, kids were coming out of good schools, they wanted to go into technology, finance, or if they were so inclined, the PR entertainment world. And no one was coming into fashion, unless, of course, you were on the design side. And then it was easy to go to some of the design schools and find a good person. But I decided that I looked around my company and I needed smart people. And smart kids and disciplined kids generally came out of good schools. Back in those days, it was easier to go just to a Craigslist and I put an ad in. And I really got very good with my executive assistant at the time of scanning resumes and looking for a few key things. Their experience mattered very little to me at that point because they had none. I mean, if they did an internship in the industry, that might have been good. But I did look at the school they went to, the curriculum they chose, the grade point average, and then I was very interested in their extracurricular activities. They also looked for kids who were coming to New York who would come from outside of New York. That showed a real drive and a real determination. So I hired this young woman You might have known her over the years. I don't mind mentioning her, Hoy, because she went on to be in her own business one day. I love her still to this day. And Hoy was very bright. After about 6 months, I turned to her and I said, Hoy, what do you look for in a company? And without hesitation, she said, I look for people just like me, smart, want to work hard, want to achieve, want to accomplish something, and nobody lazy. I don't like lazy people around me. And I knew in that moment she was saying something bigger than the question I asked. And I looked around the company and I thought, wow, I need more people like Hoy. And so that set me out on a mission to acquire talent. And so from that day on, for over 20 years, the first interview in the company is always with me. And the only reason it's with me is because I happen to have an ability to scope or to seek capability, register or identify talent and capabilities. And I have a way of communicating that I can draw out of people through a series of questions who they really are, what they want. So the first interview is with me. And the reason for that is, like many of us in the company, you might have had this experience where you have people interviewing for a position and you might be the second or the third, the last interview. And within 5 minutes, you're listening to this candidate and you're saying, no, this is not right. So I took over the talent review. And often I like to get into what that interview, how that goes.
This is great, by the way, Drew. This is really good stuff. So what I heard is you hire people for roles based on their unique ability.
That's right.
And you assess this through your interview questions, as well as the resume, who are motivated, who are talented, right?
Right.
That gets the right people into the room. Right. So now you have the right people in the room. And let's look at today. Again, you're in a fast moving industry. Things change all the time. You got to be looking ahead, 6-9 months from a design perspective. And on top of that, margins in your industry are known for having been shrinking.
Volatile.
So it's become even more challenged. When it comes to having the right culture, is it just a matter of having the right people in the room? Or is there something else that you do where you have people who they're good with change, they can get into the detail to make sure that you're able to sell a great product and at a price where you can still make money?
Those are all great questions. I'll try to break it down one at a time. So I think 51% or more, I'd like to say 80%, is getting for building a culture and a competitive culture, because that's really one of the most important things that I emphasize is, are we competitive? Do we differentiate compared to our competition? And one way I look at that is in all of the key roles in the company. It's an industry with a finite amount of customers and not that many competitors. And the competitors haven't culled the competition over the years. The industry's tough. The competitors are all good. And so I'll look at my head of sales and say, is my head of sales as strong or better than the head of sales of my two major competitors? And I reposition down the road. But before we get into how we grow them and how we make them better performers, I can tell you that when I'm looking for a talent, I'm looking for a couple of things. I'm looking for someone who personally aspires to greatness, personal greatness. But I'm also looking for that person who aspires to personal greatness, who's collaborative and likes to work in a team environment. You probably know from sports over the years that there's nothing like winning with a team. Right? And there's nothing like losing with a team, because when you lose with a team, there's somebody there to pick you up. So being collaborative, aspiring to personal greatness, having talent or capability and the desire to learn more. One of the things that I do is we do 2 assessments on candidates before we even meet them. After a 15-minute screening interview, just to check them out, my executive assistant handles that. There's many assessments. We happen to use 2. One I know you're familiar with, the Colby assessment. That's a connotative assessment. Truthfully, Rob, I don't even remember what connotative means. But it does speak to what a candidate will do naturally and what they won't do naturally. And they break it down into 4 classifications. So it's detail orientation, follow through or follow up, quick start, the ability to just dive into a new idea, depending on how high a quick start you are, less information or more information. And then the last one I call builder, which in my design area, it's really important because the higher number, most of the world is a 2 or a 3, as you know, in Colby. Many of my designers are 4, 5, 6, 7, and they have a different orientation in terms of how they perceive the world. The other assessment I do is called Best Work, written by Chuck Russell. By the way, these are both about $50 a piece. So if we have 4, 5, or 6 candidates, we're investing $500 or $600 in the process up front. But these assessments are key for me when I'm doing the first interview, because they indicate capabilities and talents. They indicate in Colby a specific orientation. In the best work, they also exhibit general reasoning scores or intelligence. But back to unique ability for a second, because I think this was a Dan Sullivan line once, but he said, when you hire just smart people, like we talk about who we're going to hire, and most entrepreneurs say, we want to hire smart people. Smart people do everything well. And he used to tell me that you can put on a index card 4 or 5 steps on how to get something done, and a smart person will figure it out. But is it exceptional? Is that work exceptional compared to someone else's? Because when you're exceptional and you find that person's unique ability and you keep them within it 70 or 80% of the time, one, they create value, real value, differentiating value. Two, you would think doing something 70 or 80% of the time might be like boring, but it's not for the person who's exceptional at that, because they're always learning. They're just involved, they're engaged, they want more. Driving unique ability and exceptional capability is the key. And then once we get them in the company, my employees, our team, comes first. I mean, it's really the only asset we have as a company. We have inventory and we have technology, but the only asset we have is our people and their time. So then you start speaking to how clear are the outcomes that you want to have as a company this year or for the next 3 years. You would call them objectives. How specific are they and how measurable are they? And how do we get the whole team departmentally to understand what their role is in the objectives and move forward together?
This is awesome. And my biggest takeaway, and we've done a lot of podcast episodes, I don't think I've ever heard it as clearly as I've heard it from you, is the biggest impact on your culture, and your culture is known for being exceptional. The biggest impact is you're getting the right people in the room. You put in a huge amount of effort into the recruiting, into the hiring process up front.
That's right.
And there's other things that you do once they're there, but you get these exceptional people working in their unique ability who are collaborative.
Right.
And then the Colby helps you probably with the unique ability.
I'll give you another thing that is just to put a cap on the type of personality, especially with young people. And we often hire for our opening entry-level positions, young people out of good schools. And I often say to them, there's 4 habits. Again, I think this was another Dan Sullivan idea, but there are 4 habits that if you live by these habits, you will be referable from one person to another. And I used them on my children when they were growing up. The first one was show up on time. We have a lot of women in the fashion industry who work. They had families. Back before we were hybrid, they would work long hours. I wasn't so concerned about somebody showing up at 9 a.m. I mean, they were here on time anyway. But what I was concerned about was if we're showing up time is a deadline. If you have a deadline or you've made a commitment, meet that commitment. And oh, by the way, if you can't, just raise your hand, communicate. Most people are understanding. If you say early enough, I need a little bit more time, they're quite forgiving and they'll partner with you. So show up on time, do what you say is how we build trust. It's really important to me. Finish what you start. This just came from the multitasking days of people thinking multitasking was a real skill. And I was noticing that even with myself, I was great at putting a to-do list together. I wasn't necessarily great at finishing it. And so finish what you start. But the key, again, back to the culture, in my company, and especially in the fashion industry, although it's changed much in the last 40 years, but 40 years ago, you had people like Donna Karen, and I don't want to call out Donna, but she's famous for this, so I won't call her out. Just yelling and screaming at her employees. And we had a lot of egotistical business owners who, if business was good, they pounded their chest, it was all about them. And if business was bad, damn it, Rob, it was all about you. So in my company, I just knew that we were going to say please and thank you. And really, it's driven off of a culture of respect for one another. Now, again, getting the right people in the room who the associates naturally respect each other because they admire one another. That's key. And then if I could just for another minute, moving it to the next level, I talked about those objectives, but we invest in our people. I have a fund that's available for everybody in the company. 2 times per year, they can ask for or utilize a $500 allowance for education 2 times a year. And I often say it'd be great if it was aligned with something you do in the company, but it doesn't have to be. Because again, just the idea of continual learning. I was a lifelong learner. I know you are a lifelong learner. And I just want to elevate people and hope that they get into that as well. Quarterly strategic planning meetings is something that we did for 7 years in a row. COVID was an interruption. We're going to begin them again in 26. We would take 20 to 25 people in the company out of the office for 6 or 7 hours a day, breakfast, lunch, Everybody in the company rolled through this program. It was facilitated with a moderator, a consultant that we used. And the results at the end of the day were mind-blowing in that we would spend, there was no specific pattern, but one of them was we would review the last quarter's results. And when you get 20 people in a room and they've all got a whiteboard, piece of paper, and they're writing down what they accomplished. And then when we all step back after breakfast in the first hour of the morning, and you think to yourself coming into that room, oh my God, my to-do list is just going on and on forever, and I've just got so much to do, and am I accomplishing anything? And then in that moment, you just step back, and this is how we start the day, with just looking at what we've accomplished, and then of course we get into what we want to take forward. There's a whole program, and every quarter is a different quarter. There's no set agenda for sure.
This episode is brought to you by Work Better Now, your trusted partner for accessing high-performing talent from Latin America. Our clients say that partnering with Work Better Now has transformed their businesses by providing the proactive, reliable, and skilled professionals they need to thrive. For more resources to help your business grow, visit workbetternow.com/eguide. And if you're ready to build your dream team, head to workbetternow.com to schedule your consultation today. As a special thank you to great talent, great business listeners, we're offering $150 off your first 3 months. Just mention great talent during your consult.
I mentioned outcome-specific objectives. Generally, revenue and gross profit or sales is the number one goal of the company, hitting our sales plan. It's not the one that I get people to concentrate in their reviews when they're also writing personal objectives, because that's something that we do every day. But in order to tie the company together, we got away from revenue scoring and we got into gross profit measurement. So every order that comes through, if we get $1 million order, for those who might be associated with the industry or a shopper in one way or another will know what I'm talking about. If we get $1 million order from Kohl's, that might actually be $250,000 worth of gross profit dollars. If we get a $550,000 order from Dillard's, that's $325,000 of gross profit. So in the old days, the $1 million order takers were pounding their chest again. Here we go, the big order. But it was the Dillard's order that really made some impact. And those numbers can vary. So we pay salary, we pay bonus, and we have everybody's bonus tied into desired outcomes that come from their review and their personal objectives, but also from the company's perspective, the results are tied to a gross profit dollar. And everybody's in on that, and everybody contributes. Since COVID, we've had a 9 a.m. Zoom call with the entire company. Whether we're in the office or out of the office, everybody gets on Zoom, and we just speak. Sometimes they're 5 minutes, sometimes they're 15. And it's a good platform for communicating every day, whatever needs to be communicated. And for me, as the CEO, it's a good opportunity every once a week, twice a week, to just reinforce some of the things that I think are important. And you can speak to those things as being cultural, calling out which department is very busy at this period because it's a heavy design cycle, and which department might be having some time to think and be inspired because it's a slower cycle for them. And when you do something like that, if I may add, because I know you're a business owner, there's always these cycles in business. And when one of my departments, usually design, is in the peak cycle, well, in a peak cycle, your to-do list is not getting done. It's just getting longer. It's about prioritizing that day what needs to get done. But what I hear is, oh my God, we need more people. We can't get the work done. Back in the day, I would go out and I'd hire more people, only for them to get into the slower cycle and realize, what are these people going to do now? So it's just communication, reinforcement of what's happening in this moment.
Yeah, you just shared so many awesome.
Yeah, talk fast.
I don't know if they're going to be ideas for everybody. I think a lot of them will trigger ideas, but so many awesome things that you're doing in your company. The two that really stuck out to me was having everybody, whether it's on a quarterly basis or however often, just list their personal accomplishments in front of others.
Right.
Is really, really powerful. And I'm not sure I've ever seen that before. And the other is gross profit, particularly now compared to, let's say, 20 years ago, and your business is really the way you're making money, and sharing that information and making sure everybody understands how important that is over revenue. I find that to be pretty compelling. Drew, I want to go back to something you said. You're the first person who hires in the company. And
the first person who interviews.
Sorry, my mistake, who interviews. And you said among the reasons you do that is because so many times somebody's made it through round one, it's not you, round two, and then it's finally you. And then within 5 minutes, you realize, hey, this isn't a fit. What do you do on that first interview within the first 5 minutes when somebody's not a fit? We've all been there where you just know, and it might not even be 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And of course, how do you balance
I'm anticipating a question, so I
Yeah,
interrupted you. I'm sorry.
you know where I'm going.
Yeah. That's a great question. I'm a little bit of a sucker, too, in this regard. But I'll just say first that the hit rate on the first interview, whether it's a good candidate or not, is pretty good because we've gotten very good at reviewing the resume and looking for the attributes that we like. But to answer your specific question, yeah, sometimes within 5 minutes, I know that it's not the right person. But where I say I'm a sucker is that at my age, I've been doing this a long time, and I care about people a lot. So I will switch the interview to discovering what's important to them and reinforcing and sharing some experience as we do in our forum groups, right? We don't necessarily give opinions, but I'll share experience with these people. So even if I know in 5 minutes, I'll probably still spend 25 minutes with them. There are days where I've thought I just wasted my time, but never really ultimately, because I know that I've made, in many cases, a small impact on that person. Look, they're in a vulnerable position there. They're looking for a job. They need a job, and they should be treated with respect. And if I can help them in any way, I do. That's my answer to that question. I will go back to something else, though, about the investment that we make in our people, again, because you started and we had talked about speaking to the culture. I also make a significant investment in my senior executives. As you know, because we talk, I currently have 7 reports. I'm restructuring the company for the future to get down to 3. But most of the 7 on my management team are involved in some kind of extracurricular coaching, whether they're involved in Vistage, a couple of them, or there's a consultant that works with them specifically, or they're involved in a women's group of executives. I certainly see the value in that because especially over time, it wasn't always this way, but now those executives on my team range from being with me from 13 to 25 years. I mean, there's some real longevity here. And I don't want to say that they can get stagnant in any way, but opening them up to the outside, other business leaders, other women, it's impactful. I just think that that kind of investment, you should always be allocating. There are all of us on our income statement. We've got the revenue, cost of goods, maybe a gross profit, and then you've got that expense line. And very early on in my career, I recognized which expenses on the ledger were actually investments. So I would have a CFO who would say, "What are we spending money here for?" Yada, yada, yada. And I would say, "You don't understand, but that's not an expense, that's an investment." And I would try to explain it to him. Whether he got it or not didn't matter.
Yeah, 100%. I think most business owners want to have a leadership team that basically run the business, right? And you're just there to kind of coach when necessary. And you want to give them the same tools that we give ourselves.
Right. Yeah.
They're extremely powerful.
I think that as a fellow CEO, your ability to evolve precipitates or enhances the ability of your team to evolve. I mentioned I'm going from 7 reports to 3. I'm really looking to pull myself out of the operating day-to-day of the business. I've been doing it for a long time. And when I get into what my unique ability is, I'm really could create more value doing other things than just operating and having meetings back to back all day. But in order to do that, you have to have a management team that is strategic or has the ability to think strategically. And what does that mean? That means that they don't only just understand the objectives, but they make a plan for it. They develop tactics that will help achieve the objectives. They communicate them amongst each other and throughout the company. And then they come back to you and they give you a budget or tell you what support they need. So I'm looking to delegate just about everything. And I think that's a good principle for a CEO, every piece of paper that crosses your desk. Like, whose job is this? But the one thing that you should never do, and I'll never do, is abdicate the leadership, or as I define it, the first 15 minutes of thinking about anything. I want to be involved in, I have the experience and I have the knowledge of the business to great degrees. Involve me in the thinking of this strategy. How do we want to think about this? And then I just let them go, check back in. And along that line also, do not let perfect get in the way of possible. That was a quote I heard once, and I loved it because I'm really a big fan of any project that we're doing. Let's get to 70 or 80%. And we'll probably review along the way anyway, but let's get to 70 or 80%, and then let's just roll it out. Let's not try to make this perfect.
100% in agreement there. Yeah. Drew, this has been awesome. I could literally talk to you because I have so many other questions. We might have to do a part 2 about so many other things. This has been incredibly helpful to me, and I'm sure for our audience. Drew, where can people find out more about Collection 18 and yourself?
LinkedIn. I think in the show notes we have my LinkedIn. Yeah. The fact is, Rob, I have the lowest social media presence that you'll ever meet. Never posted once. The company posts, and we do have a website, collection18.com. it's more of a lookbook. We don't sell directly to consumers, but
Right.
you can get a look at what we do and understand it.
Perfect. Drew, thanks again for being on the show,
It was a
and
pleasure.
we will see you soon. Thanks for listening. The Great Talent, Great Business podcast is brought to you by Work Better Now. Don't forget to review, subscribe, and download the worksheet for this episode at the link below. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on LinkedIn at Great Talent, Great Business, or visit greattalentpodcast.com.